When it comes to Virgo, which is an earth sign and does deal with the systems and ecology of the earth, this is about understanding all the interrelationship of karmic forces as a system. Now, that's for you to also internalize to your own life, because we're going to be going into a deep dive around all your life systems. Your life, everything about you is connected to systems, and systems are Virgo. We know Mercury is messenger of the gods. Let's get down to just real quick how Mercury retrogrades operate. So Mercury goes retrograde about once every 3.5 months, more or less 3 times a year in a sign or signs, if it's cusping out. And it will stay retrograde. I've seen it go as long as 23 days, sometimes 20, sometimes 21, somewhere between 20, 23 days. Usually it's 21, 22. It's retrograde, let's just say for about 3 weeks. And there's 3 parts to the retrograde process: setup phase, the retrograde itself, which contains a midpoint, and then you have the integration phase when Mercury stations direct. When Mercury goes retrograde, we really are then pressured by synchronicities in our lives to go inside and take an evaluation of certain things that are bumping us around. And where I want you to focus on the bumping is within all things Virgo. And then make that connection from Virgo to other things. So Venus and Leo is playing a role. There's something else maybe in your chart that's activating. And then here's this Mercury retrograde in Virgo with a message on behalf of that. All of it. But what we are called to do, nonetheless, is really use the archetype Virgo as the door in. And as the messenger. That is the pattern that's delivering the message. So if we resist this, well, we get the trickster. It's just kind of that simple. And so, yeah, trickster, you want to really be mindful of it. Like I said, I can feel its energy. And if I could point you intuitively to identifying its electricity in your psyche, in your life, it's kind of like static electricity to me. It has like a bit of a white noise hum to it. When I feel the trickster in my own life and environment, I can actually feel the frequency of it because I've been, plugged into all this kind of work for God knows how long. But I want you to keep in mind, it can be greatly mitigated through a guide like this. So let's keep rolling here. The setup phase for this retrograde started August 3rd, 2023. And around that time, I want you to reflect back right now, going in. What was going on in your life that started to feel like a bit of a rumble, bit of a, there's a little chaos starting to brew. There's some themes coming up. You want to look to the themes. You want to get thematic. You want to go, okay, what consistent themes start popping up in my shadow dancing with people, in my own self-sabotage, in my health, in the world. So I always find it so helpful, and I do this all the time. And oftentimes it can be uncomfortable for people because I will totally include politics and everything in between, because we got to look at the holism of life, people. That means everything. And if we do that, we can get our coordinates with it and understand also what's going on out there and how that might mirror what's going on in us, right? So you look at the environment, start to track themes there too. I mean, the news headlines and I think events, these are synchronicities oftentimes in the setup phase of fate. But if we get alchemical and symbolic and we go, wait a minute, what's that archetypally about? And the larger cycles, okay, got those coordinates, but now there's a Virgo message coming through about how to move into greater holistic medicine, Virgo word, regarding all of this, both out there and in me. So what was out there and also in you that's been kind of energizing and activating since August 3rd. Take a minute with it. Sometimes you got to take a step back. Now, what I'm going to offer you is actually a Virgo guide, some Virgo metrics for you to go, oh, yeah, Hado, totally. I see what you're saying now. Because obviously, if you don't know in depth a lot of the different dynamics of the Virgo archetype, well, you're not going to be able to evaluate it as easily. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm your little Sherpa. Let's do a Virgo Sherpa mountain climb. When you look at Mercury retrogrades, we are looking at a cycle that wants to empower you with new choices. And those new choices are born out of seeing your own karmic grids and the karmic grids of the world and how you relate to those, how you participate in those. And it's also about really getting a foot in your soul contract, those soul agreements you made before you were born. Now, the way that you get even a deeper foot astrologically in that is through your natal chart or your sun sign. You look at that sun sign, which is a force of development, not what you innately are. And you go, okay, how will this Virgo retrograde, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, how is this cycle going to help my Aries solar journey, my Aries sun, my Cancer sun, my Virgo sun, my Aquarius sun? And that's where, when I said you want to look at the cycles in terms of what's your personal message, what is Mercury retrograde in Virgo giving you personally? You're going to anchor that with your sun, because that's where everything goes to activate and serve, is your solar journey through the astrological model. It's an ongoing verb. It's a statement of destiny, but it's a verb. So how does this Mercury retrograde in Virgo serve your Aries development, your Scorpio development, your Capricorn development, whatever your sun sign is? Think of that, because that is a big piece of your soul contract. Now, let's get into some stats and look at the actual cycle breakdown, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, through the actual dates of the three-part process of the retrograde. So next, we're going to look at the actual stats of the retrograde cycle, as we usually do. Now, the retrograde happens to begin on August 23rd, and it goes until September 15th, 2023. What you're looking at here is the band of degrees in Virgo that constitute the retrograde zone. Now, the retrograde zone is the band of degrees through which Mercury will traverse and then go backward and direct again. And that this time goes from 8 degrees, literally right on it. Look at that, 8 degrees exactly. That rarely happens, by the way. I think that's kind of cool. All the way pretty much to 22 degrees Virgo. So we've got this retrograde zone from 8 degrees Virgo to 22 degrees Virgo. That's the retrograde zone. So on August 3rd, that's when Mercury hit 8 degrees Virgo, where it will retrograde all the way back to. It gets back to 8 degrees Virgo on September 15th. And then Mercury stations direct and moves forward for the integration phase. And that ends on September 29th at 22 degrees Virgo. So the setup phase began August 3rd at 8 degrees Virgo. Mercury stations retrograde August 23rd in just a few days at 22 degrees Virgo. The midpoint of this cycle is September 6th at 13 degrees Virgo. The midpoint is when the sun and Mercury are in a conjunction in the sky. So they'll both be together at 13 degrees Virgo. It kind of represents this moment where there's an illumination, a blast of awareness from the sun, and the sun giving Mercury a message for us, for you. That is about the core pivots and shifts that you are being guided to engage, realize need to be made through this retrograde cycle. So usually by the midpoint, we have a pretty good idea. We've descended into the shadow once the retrograde starts, maybe even before then, really. And we've kind of met the dragons that we need to hug and integrate and transform by September 6th, if you will, the Virgo dragons. And we get to see, okay, we've got to keep open for more messages because we're not done with the retrograde, but we've got the core territory engaged. Now, from September 6th, the midpoint, to September 15th, the station direct, there is still more information coming from the unconscious, from life, from your soul contract. So it's not like it's over, but usually by that time, there is a deep sense of, I've kind of gotten to some of the core pieces of what the retrograde's about. Sometimes you're already getting that, especially if you've been doing these guides with me for a long time, and you know how to start watching that setup phase. You start to get that information even then, honestly. And I've got pages of information. I got a book of information already. But, there's still more coming. The retrograde is about meeting those unconscious shadow parts of you connected to the information. And that information is coming through what? Synchronicities, intuitions, just starting to notice the themes. Usually because we are dealing with shadow territory, comes through triggering. It comes through getting frustrated, having events happen that kind of piss you off or irritating. And, you start to go, WTF? I mean, really? And then, yeah, really, you better start, surrendering. Don't fight it. And this serves me. This is in service to my potential, my growth. So look alive and, meet and greet. All this trying to come from the unconscious to the conscious mind. Usually by, the midpoint, so this time September 6th, we've got a fairly conscious grip on what's up. Now, we're going to go into some themes, and that's what I'm going to guide you to really work with and use as your metrics and see if it applies to you, because I think it is going to, and it usually does. And of course, there'll be more, but I'm bringing you the archetypal pieces that connect to everything. So then you get your nuances from there. Let's go back to this and finish it out. Mercury will station direct September 15th, 2023, 8 degrees Virgo. Then when it stations direct, what happens next? And I want you to look at that graph. We're at 8 degrees Virgo, right? We're at see that SD and that little line? That's where we are at the station direct. Now from that point forward, that arrow with Mercury at the very end at 22 degrees, we are traversing all those degrees from September 15th until September 29th. And that's when we have to begin integrating. This is really key with this retrograde, what we have become aware of. So sometimes, if not often, the integration phase can be the hardest for people, because we can all do shadow work and go into the underworld, chat with Hermes, get a message, but that don't mean we're going to go do something with it, because that's the hard part often, right? Taking awareness and putting it into action is where change happens. Awareness is the beginning. And I don't think we start without that, right? But you've got to also go, okay, now I've got to actually take this to the streets of my life. And with Virgo in play and the themes ahead that I'm going to guide you through, we are looking at systems, your life systems, archetypal systems. You will be changing systems. And you will start to see, after we're through the 2 parts of this series, how much, actually, your whole entire life is a system with systems, within systems, within systems. So you're going to see with the eyes of Virgo. And then you've got to take the awareness of systems that, I don't know, maybe just need to go straight up by. Or they need a shift. They need a cleanup. They need repair. They need some new kind of maintenance. Whatever it might be for you, that's the integration phase, is when, all right, time to execute what you know. And sometimes we don't know everything. We'll start somewhere. Start with an archetypal team in you and the system that it's part of, and start shifting and, moving things in yourself, right? So the integration phase can be challenging. I think this time it's going to be very emphasized, because you're looking at life systems, and all of us we create through life systems. There's no other way. That's how the universe operates and creation works. The solar system is what? A system. So we got systems. I'm just saying. Now, we have to also take a minute to step back and consider that all cycles are connected in a continuum. Let me say that again. All cycles are connected in a continuum. So this Mercury retrograde is connected to the last one, which was in Taurus. And the one before that, that was in Capricorn. It's all interconnected. And if you see, and sadly, a lot of astrologers speak this way, a cycle as if it's just this thing out of nowhere, not connected to anything really, but guess what? Go hide under the bed and watch your electronics. No, everything's connected to what came before it. And we know this through everything in our lives. I mean, who you are now in this moment is connected to everything that happened to you in childhood, everything that happened to you in adolescence, and then young adulthood and adulthood, go decade by decade. Do what you got to do. Everything happened in a way that predicated you now being who you are. So cycles work that way. We live this all the time. But somehow, when it comes to astrology, a lot of people don't make that connection, that we got to interpret and look at this Mercury retrograde in Virgo in context to the continuum it's in. And that's when you're going to get real accurate information and absolute phenomenal coordinates on what the retrograde is going to bring up for you. Mercury retrogrades this year, speaking of which, have been in Earth. It's all about our Earth life, Gaia, the environment, survival, how we, are going to move forward in this rapidly deteriorating climate process that we're in that's producing really extreme weather that will only increase from here. So how are we going to, there's so much active. Now, when we get to really the bottom lines of Virgo, I want you to pay attention to something that I'm going to catch all of us on. And that's when we look karmically at something like climate change, and we don't look at its origin and its karmic system. We don't look at where it actually came from with all the different factors that are part of it. Why? Well, we don't want to stop driving our cars. And I mean, I don't want to stop driving my car. I mean, it still burns gas. It's a hybrid, but hello. So we're all in this. This is not about making anyone right or wrong. This is about really getting real and going, okay, we've got to do what we can and begin a journey toward a karmic intervention and shift into new systems. But you can never do that if you're in your denier, if you're in some part of your political tribalism that won't see certain things because the tribe won't allow it, whatever it might be in you or in the collective. These things in this retrograde, in this setup phase, I want you to think about just on the level of climate, what's happened in this setup phase. And that's systematic. Those are systems. You start to see the themes. And then micro it to your life. Where have there been systems that are failing you? And how do you assess that they're failing? Well, you look at the karmic results showing up in your life somehow, getting your attention and going, hey. And then you go, okay, how'd you get here? Where'd you come from? And then I'm going to Virgo guide you to, it came out of a system. It didn't just show up out of nowhere. It came from a karmic set of steps, forces, influences, and those all constitute a system. That's kind of what I'm saying. This retrograde in Earth is really about all of us, all these retrogrades in Earth this year. And throw in Jupiter and Taurus. Having to take a minute and go, whoa, I got to check out Taurus, the soil of my life. I'm the gardener. What can I plant? What can't I? But this is important to understand all the retrogrades this year in Earth, really bringing us to what do we value? What's our health like? What's our wellness like? What's our ecology like within our systems of self, life? I want you to consider this. Let's go back to this graph. This zone It's a retrograde zone. Yeah, absolutely. But you know what it really is? It's a message zone or messages zone. Now, where are you going to find this in your birth chart? Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, because guess what? I'm going to show you. So if you have your birth chart, and I'm going to switch cameras here, and we're going to get down with some Brenda Smith with this Mercury retrograde. Okay, so here is Brenda Smith. Hi, babe. And she's rocking a sun in Aquarius, all right? So we got the sun here. And where is then, if we're going to try to identify, well, where is the Mercury retrograde happening in her birth chart? We want to look at, well, where is 8 degrees to 22 degrees Virgo? Well, Virgo's here. Now, this is 13, so 8 degrees is going to be about right here. I'm going to estimate. And then 22 degrees is going to stretch in, I'm going to say about right here. So, you see that? That's the retrograde zone as it applies to the birth chart. Now, as you just saw, this is a wonderful example of this. The retrograde for Brenda Smith is actually occurring in 2 houses, the first and second. So, here's where Mercury retrograde will hit its beginning setup phase. It's going to go all the way here and station retrograde when? You know when, August 23rd. Then it's going to go back all the way here. And that's its retrograde back. And then it's got a little midpoint, literally right on the house cusp. Now, I did not plan that. That is a wonderful Mercury retrograde synchronicity. Thank you, teacher gods. So literally, and that's interesting because that would represent for her, if she were real, a very powerful message about first and second house dynamics and transitions through Virgo. Now, this is when it's going to station direct. And then it's going to go all the way back. This is the integration phase. And then that ends here. So if you see that, I just took that little graph and all I did was chart it here. Now you can do that on your own chart, and you should. And then, this isn't my purview here to go into the houses and their meaning, but if you know enough about it, or if you want to research it for yourself, it will help you dial in a little bit more around some of the themes for you in context to the arenas of your life. So first house would be identity, just generally speaking here. Second house would be about resources, value, survival, what you possess. It could be about your money. Certain things we get very mundane here. And so Brenda is going to have, for example here, a retrograde that involves a lot of assessing her systems as they're connected to identity, as well as her esteem, because this is about esteem here as well. And we have what? Esteem systems, as I teach all the time. So and then it's all about Virgo. Now I would throw in, if I was reading this, and I'm totally riffing here, but I would look at the Virgin archetype. Does she own herself? That would recruit in also maybe the prostitute archetype. How much is she selling for? And where does she need to make some systematic shifts there? And does she have identities that actually put her in the street hooker territory of the prostitute? Because these identities are based on really low esteem, low worth, low value. There could be a lot of stuff going on here. Then, this is just one piece, because then you got to connect all of that to the whole chart. So what aspects is Mercury retrograde making to all the planets? And that's where you're going to probably honestly want to get some badass computer software to kind of chart and map that out if you're so inclined and actually know how to read it, or consult an actual astrologer. But that is how you will find the houses. That's a great step. Even that alone is great information, and it'll help you locate and decipher intuitively, look at your triggering, your activations, your synchronicities, and get some more, I think, meaning out of that. So, and then, of course, let's come back to her chart. I got one more thing to say. As I was saying earlier, just to follow up on this thread, all of this serves what? Her Aquarius sun in the 7th house and that development in some way. And so, then we'd look to I don't know, all of Brenda's other cycles. So I've been saying Jupiter a lot, right? Well, let's look at where Jupiter is. Jupiter in Taurus, which is going to be up here in the 10th house in its retrograde process. And then we throw in another layer and we look at that, and and it's going to go through a retrograde journey. And, okay, where's Venus in Leo? Well, following up on that from last time, Venus in Leo is actually primarily in her 12th house for the most part in its retrograde process. So this is how you get holographic. And this is, takes a certain skill that not everyone has, obviously. And that's not right or wrong, but it's a good way to start considering things. If anything, I would just have you ground the houses. And that to me is really enough, because here's the thing. Astrology is awesome. This can tell you so damn much. It's what really helped me develop into be a very accurate and spherical based intuitive. But you got your life, you got what's going on in synchronicity around you. And that's what I always emphasize. Astrology is what we live. Do not ever let the chart supersede that. Or I can't interpret what it means. You don't need to, in a way. You just got to live your life and look alive at the synchronicities and get symbolic and get into a guide like this and let the rest kind of sort out. It will, I promise. But I do like giving you a little extra something to maybe help you figure it out. Now, there are cycles of special mention. I'm going to reiterate here and go into some more threads on. Venus is retrograde in Leo. We've talked about this already. It's going to station direct on September 3rd. This is very connected to the Mercury retrograde as Leo precedes Virgo in our development. What does that mean? That means there's something going on with Virgo, which would be the case anyway to some degree, in which we really have to assess the usefulness of our creativity. Virgo, as a pattern and archetype, wants things that can be useful. And useful for what? Well, leaning really into Virgo, it's about useful in terms of the systems of our lives or service, which we have systems of service. So both and. So if I'm working on being seen and exploring myself with this retrograde with Venus and Leo, I want to then, in this retrograde, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, go, okay, what's the usefulness of visibility? What's the usefulness of this unique creative soul thing about me? How was I born through soul contracts, soul agreements to use my creative gifts? Finding and coming into your light in full connection without apology is not just a narcissistic, ooh, look at me, I'm a star moment. It is about how can I use my light skillfully, usefully in service to others. Well, you can't do that if you're hiding out. And that's what the Venus thing's addressing primarily, right? Okay, now you're not hiding. Now what? Well, how are you going to use it? Where could it be useful? This is just one thread. This is just one thread, but it's a main one to show how the Venus retrograde in Leo is connected to this Mercury retrograde. This Mercury retrograde in Virgo goes, okay, thanks, Venus. All right, Leo. Now, how are we going to do this? How are we going to integrate you into creative systems of service? Now, moving off Venus, there's a thread. You can explore more if you want in yourself and in your chart. But we have Jupiter in Taurus that's going to station retrograde September 4th. The same day, as I said, that Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to trine Taurus for the second time while it's standing still. So, Jupiter in Taurus, hey, I am here to wake you all up to your environment and the soil of that environment. So, you know what? You might have goals, visions, and dreams, but if the environment isn't hospitable to those being planted, nurtured into growth, it ain't happening. I'm sure the people in Ukraine, before Russia invaded, had goals, dreams, and aspirations. I know one guy who's an actor that did. And now that's all gone. And I know one guy who's an actor who's now dead in the Ukraine. This is a big lesson because our spirituality and a lot of our self-help does not teach this. It's been a bit, and I don't mean this completely negatively because I think we got to start somewhere, but it's been a bit narcissistically focused on positivity and gratitude and step into your vibration. And it's your vibration alone that's going to magnetize and bring to you all this and that. And that is bullshit. Why is it bullshit? Because your vibration is connected to a system of vibrations. The world, it's called. And your vibration alone is not enough. You need an environment that matches and vibrates with you, with your goals and dreams, through what's possible in that environment, so that you can actually fulfill and embody and manifest that. So it doesn't matter what vision board a Ukrainian has erected when the vibration of war is in their field. That vibration will trump everything. Your goal today is not to get hit by a bomb or raped by a soldier. So this is a teaching I want you to get. It's bottom line Saturn, really Pisces actually a bit, but it's very Virgo. If we don't understand, and it's Taurus, if we don't understand what's on the ground, what's in the soil, what kind of soil are we dealing with? The soil of war, not real good to plant a lot of dreams in. The soil of climate change, not real good for Hawaii and all the dreams they had just 2 weeks ago before most of the island caught on fire. Now, here's the thing. We're in a time where that could be you next. That could be me next. And this is all to say, this is how we start to look at what is our soul contract in these times right now? What's our destiny? How are we going to live in that? I'm not saying we obsessively focus on things maybe outside of our control, but we damn well pay attention to the forces in our systems and in our soil and in our field. And then destiny says, yeah, you do. And you know what? You source your Leo. And now you take that to heal. This is Virgo healer archetype and wounded healer. You take that to heal some part of the system. And we're going to get into what that means for you personally and what that just even means later. But I gotta set the groundwork. Here's the thing, you can kind of go like this to me and, these aren't fun things to look at. I get it. But guess what? It doesn't mean it goes away. And you're not actually now working consciously as a co-creator with the actual factors and forces of what is happening in our lives right now. And if you're not looking at those things, you're not empowered to make the choices you need to make. You're not guidable either. Your angels can't talk to you. I want to move to Florida because I want blah, 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 blah. And your angel's going, do not do that. The water's rising. Hurricanes are going to get worse. Don't go there. But I'm going to live in the sun. I need vibrations of sun and palm trees. And your angel goes, that era is coming to an end in that state because the climate's going to wash it out. So no. I've done readings with people where they won't hear any of this. So these are things to consider on so many levels. And I really sense, hey, why are we in these Earth retrogrades this year? I'm giving it to you right now. Jupiter, the bigger meta view from Mount Olympus, is saying, look at what is happening in the field. Virgo is also bringing a thread of that. I cannot wait to tell you the story that I'm going to share with you. It's a mystical one. Jupiter and Taurus, and when it goes retrograde, it's Jupiter's been in its setup phase. When it goes retrograde September 4th, that's when the descent to the underworld begins. This is just a setup this summer. So there's more ahead. And not to scare you, but it's to say, look, are you looking? Are you seeing? And what in the shadow part of you, in terms of the shadow Virgo part of you, wouldn't look at something, and why? We got to look at that with curiosity. You can never change what you won't look at. And if you got a dysfunctional system, life system, archetypal system, and you won't look at it, it is not changing. It will continue to produce the same karma. And what we're taught these days is to look at karmic results and interpret them along the lines of our biases and our I don't know, political tribalism or our denial. And you can do that. There's karma for that. And your systems don't change. The world systems don't change. So, all right, moving on to another cycle, Chiron retrograde in Aries. It's going to have an in-conjunct conversation with Mercury retrograde in Virgo. And this is part of the 3-part phase of the retrograde process. And this brings in, with Virgo and Chiron, themes around healing. What does it mean to heal? Also, wounding. How were we wounded? What are the wounds about? Within Chiron, we do have the orphan child, the rejected orphan child archetype. We also have medicine. So we're going to end on some positivity, I promise. Empowerment, solutions, medicine, Virgo medicine. But to know what the medicine needed, you've got to look at the wound. You've got to look at the karma that brought the wound into play, that did the wounding. And we often don't really do that. So if I'm an abused child, I've been obviously abused by, a parent, and we then make the parent wrong because they abused us without seeing the karmic system of which that parent came from to become an abuser. And we're not really healing the system, the family system, until we do. And we don't, we have that whole system in our subconscious, ourselves, in as much as our wound and our experience of being in that family. So to really thoroughly bring healing to a system, you have to see the system. To really thoroughly bring healing to a wound, you have to understand the system the wound came from. And that's a big theme. We're pretty much taught, well, we're just going to address the wound or address the issue or address the scandal or address whatever it might be, sensationalized by media these days, instead of actually going, wait a minute, this came from a system. This didn't just pop out of nowhere. That's not how co-creation works here. And we know that, certainly through our wounding. And so Chiron is having this conversation. In conjuncture, it's kind of like a bit of a debate, really. So there's a bit of a debate between Chiron and Virgo about how to come to the medicine. And it's a lot of adjusting, and then adding on and exploring and then adding on. So that's alive through the retrograde. Now, Uranus will go retrograde in Taurus on August 28th. And it will have a surprise trine conversation with Mercury at the very end. I'm going to show you later of the integration phase. That's so interesting to me. When it caught my eye, I went, oh my gosh, it's so wow. Because Mercury is not talking to Uranus until then. So there's some breakthrough that Uranus wants to give this retrograde, a revolutionary new way to think within the Virgo pattern about all the things I'm talking about: healing, medicine, holism, systems. So that's kind of nice. But Uranus is going to go retrograde and be in a retrograde, its own kind of process of working things out at a meta level when it gives the message. Saturn is in its first year cycle in Pisces. Pisces is the opposite archetype of Virgo. They are inextricably connected that way. Now, that's why I would say that this Mercury retrograde in Virgo recruits the Pisces, Saturn Pisces cycle right in. So if you're in the Cosmic Guidance package, we went deep and we still got 9 more lessons deep to go. It's a whole wheel of lessons, 12 lessons of this cycle. That's where all that's going to kind of be here as well. Now, Saturn, stationed in its first of 3 retrogrades during its sojourn through Pisces on June 17th, stationed retrograde. And it's going to be retrograde throughout this whole Mercury retrograde. And what's really going on here, I want you to think about this, because Saturn is in the early degrees of Pisces. In fact, it's not in the degrees. It comes right up to like 7, 8-ish, but it's not in the degrees of this retrograde with Virgo in opposition. So what I feel this Mercury retrograde in Virgo is doing regarding in terms of Saturn is it's laying down framework that is going to matter for the rest of the Saturn journey in Pisces when it gets into these degrees 8 to 22 of the zone of this retrograde in an opposition. Let me say it this way. If you attend to the themes that I'm going to present and whatever else comes up for you, you will be better prepared for the Saturn activations ahead. Archetypally looking at Virgo as a pattern, on one hand, it is a pattern of taking things in, breaking into their parts analysis, and then selecting out of that what serves the holism of you in your life going forward, and then eliminating what isn't useful. And that's the key word. Virgo loves the word useful, loves it. And what isn't useful gets released. So you might be looking at themes in this Mercury retrograde in Virgo of psychic constipation. And you need a laxative, baby. You know what I'm saying? You need some kind of psychic laxative to get things moving. But in all seriousness, really, that metaphor does actually apply. But why do we get psychically constipated? What does that even mean? Well, we get stuck and hold on to stuff that we've taken in, or we take in stuff now every day. I mean, my gosh, the internet is feeding our psyches constantly something. How much of that's accumulating in you? This retrograde is going to have you evaluate that. What's building up? Now, let's pause button and do a little breakout sesh on being an empathic soul, being someone who is hypersensitive, therefore has a greater bandwidth of allowing things in vibrationally, psychically, emotionally, psychologically, across the board. This is where we look at Virgo as a force of psychic hygiene. And we go, okay, well, how am I managing my psychic hygiene? What am I letting in? What are my psychic systems letting in? And if you're an empathic soul, you naturally let stuff in without trying. So Virgo is one of your best friends, your empathic souls. You need to get to know this archetype. You need to buddy up with it. You need to be with it on the regular so that you can let go and actually, full stop, not even let stuff in. Do not let this stuff keep pouring in. One of the themes that I've seen coming up for lots of people, and it's very contextual, is during COVID, I think we really got into this system of like hyper focus on all the news headlines and everything that's happening. Because COVID was just such a shit show, we were kind of like, well, what's going to close today? Am I going to die? How viral is this thing? How deadly is it? We were, hanging on the edge of our seats, looking and watching. I know I was. How am I going to, I don't know what's going to happen with my job. What's going to go down the line of everything that came online during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it instituted certain unconscious systems in us of hyper focus that allows a lot into our system that is not helpful or useful. And we never took a minute to shift out. Am I right or am I right? Check out your way of being in the know or being in life. You just got so focused on the next thing that you can take your eyes off your phone, your app, the news, checking in on so many things that I think it's actually an adaptation to trauma. I think COVID-19 was a traumatic event for everyone on some level. And so now's the time to take conscious control. This is one thread of how you're letting things in, how much you're constipated with that, contaminated in some cases. And are you letting it go? What are you holding on to? And what I really want to get to here is, okay, great, but let's get systematic here. Let's look at this as a system. We can go to archetypes. We will go to archetypes, but I want you to just get into base level habits, routines. These are all Virgo, baby. Habits, routines. When you apprentice a habit, and usually more when we're adults, it's conscious we do this, but I think COVID was very unconscious and the habits we got out of that. And so, yeah, you gotta take a minute and go, what are my habits? Get ground level. This is Virgo. It goes to this basic and this obvious? And are they useful? How do we determine what's useful and what isn't? Well, you get into your system holistically and you begin to understand, hey, does this empower me? Does this focus nourish me? Does this focus inform me or contaminate me? Am I being informed or infected by the news or by what I'm looking at? This is Virgo. We got to become discerning. That's a Virgo quality of what we want to take in. And this needs to be a conscious move. So one thing I'll have you evaluate as a theme is, do you have habits, routines, or systems that adapted from COVID that are still running you? Your focus, where your attention goes, your ways of relating to yourself, the world, the news, events. Now, we are in a crazy time of lots of drastic, real things that we should absolutely be paying attention to. I'm not saying that's not true, but how we pay attention, I think, is important to evaluate. So this is important. This is not looking away at life. This is rather discerning what to look at and what not to. And that plays out unconsciously through archetypes and how our empathic systems do indeed catch a psychic virus, get hijacked by that virus once it starts replicating in our psyche. And next thing you know, we're just constantly, and I think a lot of us, man, we took some viruses in, not just the COVID-19 virus. There was a whole psychic level of viruses that came out during that time that I think are still problematic. And we need to do some cleanup. We gotta eliminate some things, y'all. Virgo is about that. It's about how do you take in things? How do you create systems? And it's also about karma. I'm going to get to that in a bit because I want to specifically speak around an archetypal theme within karma for Virgo and really educate you on Virgo's relationship with karma. It's certainly not punitive. It is definitely result-based, and it's something that is very useful in really looking at and seeing to better understand karmic systems, the karmic systems of your life. Through Virgo, what we learn is that everything is created via a system. Now, that takes for me even, it takes a minute to go, oh, is that true? Everything is created via a system. Yeah, it actually is. Whether you can perceive the system behind the creation, that's another story, and perhaps issue that this retrograde will address. But everything's created through a system. Virgo governs the systems of life. I'm going to give you a very obvious, right now, you're in it example. This guided series is, how did it come to be? And this is where you can start to apprentice Virgo, the Virgo skills of looking at systems, understanding, analyzing, breaking systems apart to better what? Understand their holism. Analysis, when we go into analysis of psychology or any kind of thing, the analysis serves what? Better understanding the whole. So similarly, when you're looking at your own life systems, and this retrograde might bring you into many of them, you have to also consider, this is the shadow side, what you don't see and why. If you can't see, for example, what brought Matthew Shepard to hang on a fence in Wyoming? What were the karmic factors? And people will just go, hate. Okay, yeah, that is the first step in the autopsy. But we got to go back past just hate. Where did that come from? What generated it? You got to follow the thread. This is how I do intuitive readings. I start with the karmic present point of the client or whomever, and then I track back. And that's what my intuition does. Threads it back. Sometimes you got to actually decide, I need to see as much as possible about this issue, this pattern, this challenge, this dark night, this dynamic. And that is all Virgo. This is about seeing, hey, I got to see the fullness of it. Sometimes, yeah, just a little slice is enough to get you where you need to go. Absolutely. But conversely, our culture does not have time anymore for the fuller read. And that's fine, but you won't often get traction in healing or changing or shifting a system. You won't, because you're not taking enough time to see the full read. So this retrograde might ask you, hey, are you willing to actually spend the time to do the intuitive tracking and mapping, Virgo style, of your life's karmic results, the systems you're in? Virgo governs this. And the retrograde itself, I think, is going to bring this up. Now, back to this example I was going to get to. Let's take on this Holocompass Astrological Mercury Retrograde in Virgo guide, this live stream. What does it take to create something like this, to create this? So let me present, and this is just a very abbreviated version, but to get you started on what I'm talking about, what I want you to do as your guide during this retrograde within areas of triggering where you see themes coming up. This is where you apply this. All right, this guide. What are the components of this guide? Video, stream, right? I've got a PDF guide, literally, that you will get, that you can print. Now, what does it take to create this? Let's consider all that's threaded here. And I could go on for hours about what it takes. All the different forces, factors, assets, resources. Let's first start with me, because there's no astrological guide without Robert Ohado. All right, consider all that's threaded just with me. Well, I had a soul contract that I agreed to before I was born here to do this work. So that's here in this guide. It takes that. It takes my actual being born into the world, took my parents, and then it took everything that was required to see me from my birth to 50, soon to be 51 years old. So I don't know, how many animals have I eaten? All the stuff I've just from a basic human level of survival done, that's all in this guide too. All of it. Every meal I had is here. It is. It absolutely is. Every experience I had as a child's here. I could go on about that. My entire life, more or less, let's just say, and all of the development within my entire life is here right now in this guide. Let's add in 30 years of study within the fields of psychology, astrology, archetypes, intuition. That's here. All the guides I've done like this before that helped me improve how to present this material and how to really get it rocking and rolling. That's here. Now, if I go outside of that to resources I must employ to do this, well, my gosh, we've got my health, we've got my energy, my time, my money, my intuitive channels in which guidance comes to me through. One of my resources is my graphic designer that creates all the things that I put up here. I've got employees that support and help me produce this. They're here. I've got my love, my compassion here. I've got my care and my production expertise, and I could keep going. Beyond me, it also takes technology. I'm on a Mac Studio computer. I have a camera. I've got mics. I've got 2 cameras. I've got lighting. And now go into that. Just riff off that for a second, thread that out. Who's all involved in designing and creating all this technology? How many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people contributed to this, which is part of this live stream or this video on demand, whichever you're watching? That's all here. That is a Virgo karmic read, gridding it out. All the different things. It's massive, y'all. It's huge. And then planet Earth. We're on Earth doing this. I could go on and on. I have electricity to run all of this. So electricity is part of the whole equation here. I've got to have software, studio software here, astrological software. I've got to have an internet connection. This is how massive and interrelated everything I just mentioned, and ridiculous how much more there is. But all of that's in this guide right now. We don't look at things this way. We don't. We've got people that, for example, would be happy to bitch about China producing many things for the United States of America. I'll stay American-centric here. Yet they're wearing things that were made in China, or using a TV that was made in China, or their clothes, or I've said this before, I'll say it again, as part of this exercise of giving this example. Walk around your house and look at where everything was made. By the time you get done, you're going to have done a world tour. And that's a Virgo discerning way of talking truth about one world dynamics, but also the systems it takes to create anything. Take that in, because that is a model for you to look at your systems right there. There's a lot to a system, and how much of it is conscious and how much of it isn't. That is a Mercury retrograde and Virgo question. Because you might have things that are unconscious that are messing you up, that are dysregulating other systems in you, or that are just, they've served their time. We're going to get to how do you actually, let's say, work within a system when you realize that system is in trouble. It's in systems failure. How do you correct that? We need to talk about that now. Let's go to a little something different. Let's talk about your systems of self-sabotage. That, yes, your self-sabotage is created also by a system. So is your self-care, or lack thereof. So is your empowerment. So is your esteem. These are all factors of systems. Do you have a robust sense of self-esteem? Well, I'd look at that and go, okay, let me take a look at your esteem system. Let's see, this is the result. Let's look at how that result is produced. I'm going to look to your archetypal systems. I'm going to look to how you're wired. Let's go into some Virgo themes a bit more. I said ecology. We got natural law. We've got integrative systems. We've got efficiency. Virgo is a pattern of efficiency. So it is about discerning what is the most efficient use of a system or your energy or whatever's in a system. So when we talk about life hacks, for example, there's the real, in a way, sort of false presentation of a way to create something without any work or any effort. Here's the hack. Part of me really finds that word off-putting. To me, it betrays a lot of what is required to create something. Now, if we say hack in terms of a better efficiency, I'm in. So let me give you this hack that's really about me saying, I'm going to give you something that makes it more efficient to get something done or create something. Wonderful. Please, the Virgo in me is yes, please. But moreover, the word hack is thrown around without really understanding what is being said. And I would have you pay attention to that. Is this presenting a false quick fix or an efficient path and way forward that's going to get you somewhere faster in a real systematic way? Praise be. Now, that said, Virgo, one of the themes is survival. It's an earth sign. It's about service. It's also about healing. What is healing? It's looking at, let's just put on the map illness, and I'll go holographic with that. Mental, psychological, emotional, physical illness, whatever it might be. Spiritual. Well, illness is the karmic result of a system that's not working, or maybe hasn't worked for quite some time, so to speak. I mean, we can get sick from eating, toxic food or something as well. So there are exceptions here, but generally speaking, in a way, I want you to get this guidance. Illness represents a system that is not working well for some reason. Well, what is healing then? Well, we go into the illness, we start to understand, we do a karmic autopsy, a karmic mapping of illness, and we look at as many dynamics as we are guided and we possibly can. And then if we don't have the eyes to see past a certain point, we get someone who does. If we don't have the expertise to see past a certain point, we get someone who does. And then they give us a further mapping. And then out of that, we now go, okay, let's look at the holism that's needed here to correct, to heal this illness. And that's healing. It's making something whole that is not operating holistically for whatever reason. So that's Virgo. And under that comes medicine. What is medicine? It is something added into the system that brings a more holistic energetic to the system Sometimes it's something that removes or purges something out of the system that is causing the problems. But I want you to consider what medicine means to you. Now I'm going to have we're going to end on medicine, so I'm going to bring it home. But I want you these are things to think about. If this Mercury retrograde in Virgo is saying you need some new medicine in your life, your systems need a dose of vibrational attunement to holism. What does that mean? What does that look like? Virgo wants some practical movement. It is a pragmatist. It is a practical pattern. And it is about, no. I'm embodied here. I'm an earth sign. My pattern is not, I'm happy to hear your philosophy and thoughts. Okay, good. But I want the real practical usefulness and application of whatever medicine you're talking about. Light can come in, as in grace, and break apart and vibrationally alchemize matter. You got to be one hell of a channel for that, but it can. I've seen it. You probably have too. If you've ever had a Reiki session of some kind or someone who was a real gifted healer, that's what they're doing. They're using systems of light. And it's a physical thing. It gets in and does affect the physical systems. Yet, I can get a healing session with a healer who is a gifted and skilled true light worker. But if I have an addict pattern that is part of my system of self, and the system it runs, actually, it's employed by, is my system of self-disconnection and self-sabotage. I can go to every healer on the planet, but until I get into the system of my addict and its teammates archetypally, it doesn't matter how much healing I get, per se, to heal the damage the addict does. It'll just keep damaging me until I neutralize the addict, bring the mystic in, and create a mystical system. So you can go out there and practice the best of psychic hygiene, or rather, let's just say you go out there and you don't practice the best of psychic hygiene and you get psychically dirty. I always ask people, you want to know, why you're so psychically dirty? Why don't we look at what gets you dirty? And then I'm going to see no boundaries, overgiving, people pleaser. I'm going to see archetypes at the front of that. They are part of your psychic hygiene system. They actually are. And they get you dirty. And then you'll go to a healer, you'll do all these therapies and use all these light tools and clean your system out. But to what? To what avail? You're going to go get dirty again. So this is Virgo. Hey, let's actually change the system. How about we stop getting dirty, psychically dirty, in the ways the current system gets you, and then this actual light medicine, the psychic light boosting, will actually get traction. So you need to look at, in this retrograde, to some degree, I'm sure, hey, how do I actually get sick? And holographic definition of what that might mean. How do I get into karmic jams around the results of my life? Because this is what all of this falls under archetypally. We had Taurus, Mercury retrograde in Taurus was about the gardener. Mercury retrograde in Virgo now is about the harvest. So there's a part of this Mercury retrograde in Virgo that's about coming full circle out of all the stuff that's going on. And in this next, let's say, 6 weeks or so, inclusive of integration phases, etc., we are going to be looking at our own lives. And I want you to ask yourself with such deep compassion and non-judgment, at this stage in your life, how do you feel about the harvest of right now? How do you feel about what you would say is your harvest? That will get you a lot of anchoring and traction in this retrograde, because this is a pause to look back retrograde and be here now. We don't leave the moment because we want to be in the results of this moment, the harvest results of this moment, the harvest of your karmic systems, all of them, as many as you're guided to look at, and go, if this was the end of my life and this was my last few weeks on earth, and I knew this was my harvest time, how would I genuinely really feel about what's in my harvest? And then what does that question recruit? It recruits when you planted seeds, the soil they were planted in, how you as a gardener tended to all that. And this is not an exercise in putting yourself on trial and judging yourself at all. That's not what this is. You know, those that have had near-death experiences often report, meaning they die and come back, that on the other side, they had a life review before they finally came back, in which they were guided in this phenomenal way to see every choice, everything from a holographic point of view, not just their own choices and how they felt in that moment in their life, but everyone else. They had experienced through the other people, the karmic ripple of their choices, all at the same time. Because they don't have this human mind to bind them up anymore. Our souls are so holographic, they can do this. And they usually come back with a profound sense of, I must change my life systems. Because what I experienced whilst being in different consciousness in that life review showed me, I'm not really happy with this harvest. My soul's aching a bit. So there is a bit of that here. Now, I wanted to share with you a mystical experience I had before I come to the medicine of this retrograde. I think one of the flaws in our current system of thought, a lot of us may think this, that if we want peace and tranquility and resourcing, that we can get that and leave. And people, the way people usually frame this is, I'm going to go live off grid. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you believe we can do that? Can you actually live off grid? You can't. I'm going to tell you why. I was sitting in my backyard the other night, meditating on my own Mercury retrograde messages, my turning 51 soon, all sorts of things. And I have planted on my property about 70 trees by now. Over the last, it's almost been like a part-time job, frankly, over the last year and a half. And I was thinking about Canada's forests burning. And I had this thought of, thank God I'm here in Colorado. And we've had oddly, to be honest, where I live, normal, it's a little hot, but wonderful balanced weather, and hey, next year we could be the one on fire. This is just the luck of the draw this year, if you will. But I heard the trees talking. After I thought that thought, I could hear them talking. And I heard the trees telling each other about, or the trees communicating with each other about the forest burning in Canada. And what I want to impress, it was just one of those moments where I went into this frequency and heard trees talking to each other. I can't explain it. It's not like this happens to me regularly. It was a mystical experience. And in this experience, I had an incredible paradigm shift around the nature of nature, around the nature of systems. We assume that the trees in Colorado have no clue as to what's happening in Canada. That's not true. They're on a web, a communicative web that runs the whole world. All the oceans talking to each other, the birds are talking to each other. In that moment, I just felt it all, the communication system. And we think that we can go to some tranquil place where there aren't fires and sort of be inoculated against the world burning. I'm here to tell you from my own mystical journey this last week or two, that's not true. There's nowhere you can go where the trees aren't talking about the earth and all that's happening. And that is a sobering thought. I will never see this planet the same way again, because they're part of one system of consciousness called nature, and nature talks to each other. All of its elements talk to each other. And I mean, there are actually studies that trees talk to each other, within the forest. And there's great documentaries on this, but it never occurred to me that they talk over such vast continental expanses of space and distance. But they do. So my own trees are talking about what's happening to the trees in Canada. We don't take time in our narcissism, and I'm part of this too. I'm not making anyone wrong, but to really consider the true nature of our interrelatedness on this planet. And I think we need to tune into something more than just what the news is throwing at us and all the crazy. We need to pay attention to the important stuff, no doubt, but we need to understand that every living thing on this planet is talking right now about its end or the end or what's happening somewhere else on the continent. That just shook my soul. And I think it's reconfiguring me in ways I haven't even caught up to. But I want to offer that as some medicine. When I talk about systems, this is a mystical, we talk about, we breathe together, we feel together. Well, you know what? We actually do. And it's not just human beings. It's everything. So next time you're out in nature, hopefully soon, I want you to see if you can tune in to what the conversation is. It might break your heart. It certainly did mine. That said, what is the medicine of this Mercury retrograde in Virgo? Well, it's about healing systems, healing them, bringing more holistic, integrative, empowering systems into your life, in which you are the conductor of this. You are the technician. You are part of the process, a big one, a big part of the process, if not the biggest part of the process. So what medicine does your life need?